Dun, dun. Welcome everyone to the weekly crypto recap show where we go over all of the latest news in crypto from the week. Welcome to this session today. We're doing it a little differently today. I'm actually just here by myself. Usually Chris Karabats aka Zaphoid from SmartCash joins me, but he's off doing some fun celebratory things for Independence Day. So I'm just going to talk you through the news today. So we'll see how this goes. If you guys have specific things that you wanted me to talk about, then make sure that you text me. Just to start off with, a huge thank you to Anthony Monero for the power chat there. I really appreciate that. So let's start off. I mean, the things that I want to cover today, we've got the open letter that was sent to Facebook from 4 members of Congress who said, you got to shut down Libra. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the reactions of all the different countries all over the globe to Libra, because this is starting to play out. We're starting to see how people are going to treat this. It's pretty interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit about Cuba and Venezuela, looking into cryptocurrencies. We've got Brazil doing some interesting things. We've also got some new things revealed about the Craig Wright case. So some fun things there, some new documents that Stephen Pally, lawyer who's been covering this really well, has said are forged. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then just some other interesting things that have been going on as well to do with BITFINEX and some other companies. So let's go into it. Someone messaged in the chat, hi Naomi, will you be my friend? Yes, we are all friends here. I affectionately call this show the Hijinks and High Tea, where I have my tea here and I encourage everyone to do the same. And it's just a relaxed show where we talk about the crypto news and all hang out. So yes, we're all friends here until you start trolling me. I'll only read your troll comments if they're in power chats or in Bitbacker power chat form. So just so you know. The awkward thing about doing this show by myself is like when I take sips of things, there's just kind of an awkward silence. There's no one to like fill it in. So we're just going to deal with that. It's totally fine. Let's start off with this open letter. So Eric Voorhees and I chatted about this the day that it was released. He had some great insight into that. If you haven't seen the video, I encourage you to check that out. But let's start at the top. It says, Dear Mr. Zuckerberg, Ms. Sandberg, and Mr. Marcus. These are all executive level people at Facebook. And this letter is on behalf of the United States House of Representatives Committee on Financial Services. So this is a fascinating letter. It starts off, I mean, it's under the guise of a request. They're not saying we order you to shut this down. They're not saying you absolutely must. This is a subpoena. This is we're pointing a gun at you, all of that thing. It's a friendly request that they ask Facebook to just comply with. And I love it when government agencies do that, because we know the amount of leverage that the government has in this situation. It is definitely within their means to put a lot of pressure on Facebook and make them comply. But they couched this in this very friendly, we request. So they say, we write to request that Facebook and its partners immediately agree to a moratorium on any movement forward on Libra. So this is interesting right off the bat, because it says Facebook and its partners. We know that Facebook, it's done something pretty interesting right off the bat. It has partnered with all of these very powerful organizations. So we've got MasterCard and PayPal and Visa and Spotify and Uber and lots of VCs and all kinds of companies that are kind of giants in Silicon Valley who have partnered and paid, I think it's $10 million in order to become a node verifier in this system. And we're at the moment, I mean, it's not clear what this system is going to be. We've seen the white paper, we've seen what they've proposed, but as we go forward with these hearings, et cetera, this could morph into a very different product than the product that has been proposed. So it is interesting that they've kind of partnered with all these organizations to say, no, we're not in control. We've got all of these players. It's all kind of decentralized. I like to use that word. I did a review when this first came out, just pointing out that this project as it stands is anything but decentralized. It is a very centralized project, and it has some very powerful players who are part of traditional finance. And this is not going to be a coin that is going to give you financial autonomy or privacy or any of those things that we love crypto for. But it is interesting what it is going to give us. And it is interesting to see this pushback from government officials, not just in America, but all over the globe. And I'll move to other countries in a second to talk about that. But in America in particular, it is super threatening. And they outline in this letter, they say it appears that these products may lend themselves to an entirely new global financial system that's based out of Switzerland and intended to rival US monetary policy and the dollar. So let's unpack that a little bit there. It seems that right off the bat, the first sentence, the first paragraph in here, that it outlined. It doesn't say like we're worried about this being a Ponzi scheme. We're worried about protecting consumers. They kind of go into that a little bit later on, and we'll talk about that. But the initial concern that they say is that this is going to be a rival to the US dollar. Yes, cryptocurrency is, and these private coins, the different currencies companies are going to start putting out will be rivals. We have competing money now, and people in government who have been leveraging the power of having a monopoly over the money supply should be worried about this because they are going to lose some of this power. And it is interesting, saying that, oh, we're going to have this new financial system based out of Switzerland, as if this is going to be a terrible thing. So, I mean, it is interesting just looking at this, and I'll just skip to something that Brad Sherman said. So, this was, I think it was in May, the middle of May. Brad Sherman, it was pretty fun, and I mentioned this a few times on the show. He's a U.S. Democrat congressman, and he urged his colleagues to consider banning Bitcoin. He stood on the floor of Congress and said that it is a threat to US international financial power, and it needs to be nipped in the bud. So everyone's kind of on the same page here, talking about crypto in general being a threat. Brad Sherman seems to be the only person really speaking out about Bitcoin right now, but I'm not sure it'll take long for them to catch on that Bitcoin is far more threatening than Facebook. But I mean, well, it's a different kind of threatening and the different kind of products, right? And I think that Facebook and Libra is really interesting because they are right. It is going to challenge banks' authority. It is going to challenge the US dollar. This is a money that isn't going to stop at borders the way that US dollar is. If you want to use the US dollar in the rest of the world, you've got to exchange it into a different currency first. So, I mean, we talk about USD being the reserve currency and everything needs to go through New York and all of this. But at the end of the day, an individual, if I want to spend money in Australia, I can't spend US dollars in Australia. No one will accept it. I have to exchange that into Australian dollars. If I go to Canada, actually that's a little bit different. So it's always still accepted there. But anyway, you go to the UK, you go to Italy, you have to change your money. Facebook is proposing a system that is going to expose its billions of users around the globe to a money that is not going to stop at borders. That's really interesting. I think that, I mean, it's again, I have to keep couching this because I don't want to seem like, Libra is the greatest. It's not. Libra is going to be a coin that spies on you and takes your data and doesn't give you financial privacy. But it's no different from what Visa is doing at the moment. It's no different from what PayPal is doing at the moment. They're all taking your data. They're all selling it too. So I'm glad that people are talking about Facebook and the risks posed by people tracking your financial data. Financial privacy is an important thing, and I'm glad that we finally got the conversation started about this. So let's keep going through this letter because there are some really interesting things here. They say it raises serious privacy, trading, national security, and monetary policy concerns, not only for Facebook's over 2 billion users, but also for investors, consumers, and the broader global economy. So yeah, I mean, the government, they've had hearings with Facebook before about them treating data poorly. And we have to remember at the end of the day, this is something that Eric Voorhees really drilled down on in my interview with him the other day, is that it's the government that forces the banking system to collect all of our data. We're forced to trust third parties with our data at the moment in this very complex financial system. And that's not a good thing because they don't do a good job at protecting that data. They do a terrible job at protecting that data, actually. Identity theft is $1 trillion industry. People get hurt from it all the time. JP Morgan it's always getting hacked for our data. But the government is the one saying, no, you must collect all of this information on everyone, et cetera, et cetera. But now they're saying, well, there are privacy concerns about data if Facebook does this. Meanwhile, it's the government who is dictating that these companies have to collect this data in the first place. When I'm talking about financial data, they've already started talking about to Facebook about, like, we need the KYC. We need people to be linking their identities. We need, them to reveal all of this information, personal information about themselves that you have to keep private. But then they're saying, but we don't trust you to keep it private, even though they're the ones who are mandating this in the first place. So it's like this very, kind of ridiculous narrative that they're trying to spin. I want to give a two shout outs to both of them, to Anthony Monero, who sent me some power chats, super chats, I should call them. Bitbacker has the power chats. Anthony, thank you so much. He says, I wonder more and more if Zuckerberg and co aren't trying to set up a B plan. It's better to be one of the king in a stable world than one in an apocalyptic one. The big one is coming. Interesting point. And then he says, if they stabilize their coin Libra with dollars, pounds, yen, euro, did I get all those symbols correct? Gold, BTC, sooner or later, people really realize that BTC and gold are the only ones to have. I mean, I agree with you there. I think that everyone is sort of getting super scared of Libra and say, oh, this is a terrible demon centralized coin. Yeah, like, I'm not going to encourage anyone to use it. What I am going to say is that this is a great gateway into crypto. Once you're in the crypto system, like, it's a lot easier for people. It will be a lot easier for people to just change their Libra for BTC. And once they start to think differently about crypto, once they start to think differently about money and realize that there are options out there, they'll start to recognize what the better options are, right? So if it's super easy to transfer from crypto to crypto, which we know that it is, once people are in the ecosystem, it's easy. They'll be able to move to BTC pretty easily, or any other crypto of your choice. I think the difficulty is that barrier to entry where they're like, no, USD is the only money. No, it's very convoluted. I don't quite know how to get out of the system. But if Libra is going to make it super easy to onboard people into the crypto world, this could be a great way to expose them to far superior currencies than government issued fiat right now. So that's kind of exciting to me. I think that's pretty interesting. So let's continue through this letter. There's so much to unpack in here. They say that if products and services like these are left improperly regulated and without sufficient oversight, they could pose systemic risk that endanger US and global financial stability. So, let's talk about maybe the Federal Reserve in the United States and the oversight of that. I think politicians like Ron Paul have been calling for at least audits of the Fed for decades, and nothing has happened. It's super opaque. We have no idea where the TARP bailouts went because it's all completely opaque. So the government's just printing trillions of dollars and handing it out. We don't even know where that went. It's not disclosed. So when they're talking about too little oversight, maybe they should be holding up a mirror and looking at the terrible financial system they have in place currently, and all of the dangers of having so little oversight, so little say of the individual. Where we were forced to use US dollar, we're forced into this system. We have no control over that system, no say over that system, no information about that system. So I am interested in seeing a competitor come up that can maybe shake up that system. I think it's gonna be pretty interesting to see what happens there. So they also say here there are, I talked about, they're exposed to serious privacy, national security concerns, etc. It's just pot calling kettle black there. And then they say, these risks are even more glaring in light of Facebook's troubling past, with the whole data capture that happened, right? Because they had this Cambridge Analytica scandal. They're saying like, oh, well, there's all this interference with elections and all of this stuff. So they're worried about Facebook having too much information about people. But again, it goes back to the fact that I'm glad that we're finally having this conversation, right? I'm glad that people are talking about data and the need for financial privacy. You know, if Facebook gets into the business of issuing currencies and this gets the conversation going about how financial privacy is actually important, then that's going to be a good turn of events. Because right now, as I said, PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, their entire business model is based on taking our financial data and selling it. That's a huge part of their business model. So the fact that like no one talks about this, everyone's like, oh, Facebook's selling our data, but we don't even mention Chase and PayPal and Visa. Yeah, there's just a real discrepancy there. So if this gets the conversation started, that's going to be a great thing. I look forward to a society where people are worried about their financial privacy and they don't just take all of this KYC nonsense for granted as if it's, you know, it's become very normalized in our society. KYC didn't exist the same way it does right now 50 years ago. You didn't have to, I mean, sometimes you didn't even need an ID to go into a bank to start up an account. But these days, you have to divulge so much personal information. We all just take it for granted. We all just think, oh, well, obviously, that's just the way things need to go. That's just what happens. I am looking forward to a world where people start to question that again and wonder why we're divulging all of this information. Anthony Monero, you are my #1 fan at the moment, and I'm so grateful. So he just said, Libra won't be stable, and slowly it will cost more and more for people to buy it. One Libra equals $1. 6 months later, one Libra equals $10, and so on and so on. I mean, it's interesting. So Libra, again, is going to get people thinking differently about money. It's not pegged to the US dollar. It's pegged to a basket of assets. And those assets, it's not clear what they're going to be, but they've labeled, you know, treasury bonds, perhaps different major currencies around the world. So it isn't going to be one-to-one, one Libra equals $1. And again, that should get people thinking about what money really is as well, because we're very used to this system where our currency loses 2% of its value at least every year, and we don't really question that. And we're going to have this different form of currency that is backed by all these different assets. And Voorhees again said, you know, this is going to be a superior type of money to the US dollar, marginally, because it's going to be probably very tight to the US dollar, but it is going to be a different way for people to be looking at currency, and that's going to be interesting to get people thinking about what this actually is. So the final thing I want to mention about this letter that I'm going to read to you. So Facebook is already in the hands of over a quarter of the world's population. It is imperative that Facebook and its partners immediately cease implementation plans until regulators and Congress have an opportunity to examine these issues and take action. I mean, the hubris of all of this, first of all, they recognize that it's in hands of a quarter of the world's population. So this is the world that they're talking about. It's not just the US, it's the world. But they say because of that, you should hold until the US takes a look at this. You should hold all development on this currency that's going to be global, not just based in America, but across the entire world, in hands of a quarter of the world's population. But wait until America's looked at it, because we're the ones who make the rules about what can go on in the world. So it is. I mean, it's not shocking that they have this reaction, but it does make me laugh a little bit. They say that, you know, during this moratorium, we intend to hold public hearings on the risks and benefits of cryptocurrency-based activities and explore legislative solutions. That's interesting, and I wonder what's going to happen. Like, part of my conspiracy brain is thinking, well, and there are several things. So they can't send a letter to the Bitcoin CEO, right? They can't say you need to shut down development on this because Bitcoin is decentralized, and it just wouldn't work. No one would respond to that. But they can send it to Facebook. And they recognize the leverage that they have over a single entity. We've had types of digital currencies exist in the past. Bitcoin was not the first one. And they were shut down by government, or they didn't take off. They didn't have a network effect sufficient to let them succeed because people knew that they could be shut down. They didn't want to put their money into something that they knew the government had such control over because it's centralized. So now we have Facebook, Libra, which is pretty much centralized because it's in the hands of certain companies, and the government has a lot of power over these companies, a lot of favors they could grant, or they could make it harder for these companies, etc. So there's a lot of leverage there for them to force them to do what they want, and so it's interesting that they're talking about these legislative solutions. I wonder if Facebook has come out with this thing saying, "Oh, we plan to eventually become decentralized." All of these things. I wonder if the U.S. government, like, if they will only allow Facebook Libra to exist if it morphs into something completely different. What if this morphs into something that is primarily just backed by US dollars and US Treasury bonds, but then it's still accessible to people all over the globe? It would kind of become like this, like it would be like making the US dollar this global currency. You know, if we're thinking that the US is losing its power because you have places like Germany say, "Oh, we don't want this to be the reserve currency." You have places like Iran saying, "We're not going to use this." Lots of places in the Middle East saying, "We're not going to use this anymore." You have like Venezuela, Cuba talking out about this. So you wonder if the US dollar is losing its power globally, and if this project may be co-opted enough that it could further the government's plans. Like, I'm yet to decide. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. It could go in two different paths. It could either completely disrupt the US banking system, the US dollar, disrupt traditional finance as we know it, and that would be interesting to see that shaken out. Or it could just be co-opted and become just another government monetary tool. And if that happens, then we've kind of got this scary digital tracked global money. But we'll have to see. I mean, it depends what Facebook's reaction is at the moment. So we did have this announcement from Facebook's David Marcus. So David Marcus responded. He published a note on Wednesday that said that he wants to address a bunch of concerns about all of this. So he did confirm that he will be testifying before both the Senate Banking Committee and the House Financial Services Committee. It's not clear whether Facebook is going to stop development in the meantime, though. So that's interesting, and I'd be interested to see what Facebook's reaction is, how they actually respond to all of this, because I'm interested to see whether they just take it lying down. They're like, "Okay, we're going to stop everything." They are appearing to testify, but we'll have to see to what extent they toe the line. He also kind of reiterated, you don't have to trust Facebook in order to trust Libra. They're kind of selling this point of, you have all these different node validators. It's a foundation that is disassociated from Facebook and is going to become increasingly so as we go on. I mean, that's they. Uh, so where do I start about this? Um, I think that when they're talking about decentralization and eventually this becoming a permissionless chain, like, there are two things going on there. The first thing is that they cited in their white paper, we have to have a permission chain because reaching 2 billion people, no chains are currently scalable enough for us to be able to manage that. We don't have the technology to do that, and I kind of agree. We can't reach billions of people, or they couldn't on their current model. So permission chain makes sense, but we got to think, like, the reason why we have permissionless chains is because permission chains can so easily be controlled, and that's exactly what we've seen. No one has been able to say, "Well, we're CEO of Bitcoin, you've shut down development." That just doesn't exist. And yet, as soon as Libra comes out, literally within hours of them releasing their white paper, not just the US government, but France responded about this. The Central Bank of European Union responded about this. Everyone is saying, no, this has to be shut down. So it just goes to show you, like, yes, there are trade-offs between permissioned and permissionless chains. The reason why people went to Bitcoin, and that's what created this digital currency revolution, Bitcoin did, is because it could grow large enough that it can't be shut down, right? It's not permissioned. It couldn't be controlled the same way that something like Libra can. So that's something very important to keep in mind there. But they are trying to sell this idea that they are going to become decentralized. I don't buy it. I don't see companies like PayPal and Visa and MasterCard suddenly one day relinquishing their own power. So if they're the board members who vote on the direction of Libra, I don't think they're going to vote to diminish their own power. They're not just going to be like, "Oh, take my power away from me." I don't want to. I think that's ridiculous, but we'll have to see what happens. So I want to move on to some different reactions. So Japan is worried about Facebook's cryptocurrency. An unnamed official said that it will move money into an absolutely virtual world. So it is completely different than other forms of digital payment. I'm not sure I agree with that. We've been basically essentially in a digital payment world for a really long time now. The difference is that this digital payment world isn't necessarily controlled by government. Perhaps it will be. It seems like it potentially could be, but I think maybe that's where people take issue with this. Not that it's just purely digital, because I'm there. I could live entirely within a digital world right now. I don't need any physical money if I don't want it. I get paid with direct deposits. I can use PayPal and Visa and whatever else I want to make my payments. So that seems like a strange concern to have. I think there are a lot of scapegoats and strawman arguments put out by governments at the moment where they're worried about one thing, but they're saying they're worried about the other. Oh, we're concerned for consumers. Oh, we're concerned for all these things. It's just not true. Anthony, okay, so Uvis sent me a power chat and said, can't they send a letter to Craig? Right. So they could send a letter to the CEO of Bitcoin, Craig Wright, but I think that he's probably busy at the moment because he's tied up in court with this other thing that we'll talk about a little later. So he probably won't have time to reply. So that's probably why they won't do it. Thanks for that, Uvis. Anthony says Zuckerberg knows the boat is sinking. Him and his friends are building up a new arc inspired of cryptos. Yeah, probably. I mean, Facebook has been losing customers. Its earnings reports are going down each time they're released. It's not doing too well. I am excited about the Libra. As I said, not going to use it. Don't encourage people to use it, but I'm excited to see it shake up finance. I think that we've got a huge battle coming up, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Other countries that have responded to all of this. So, well, first of all, I mean, they've applied for a BIT license. Now, New York has been notoriously bad about handing these out. No one receives BIT licenses. It's been such a tragedy to see crypto in New York completely disappear because I think it took them 4 years to hand out 4 BIT licenses, which is just insane. It's such a tragedy. But Facebook's applied for a BIT license. We'll have to see what happens there. Again, its future is in the hands of regulators and government officials, so they can decide whether or not Facebook coin is going to be allowed in New York. New York is notoriously one of the worst places in the world for crypto. So even if it doesn't exist in New York, maybe it would be accepted in Wyoming or Nevada or one of these other places. So we'll have to see what happens. The UK is not happy about Libra. One of their spokespeople said, historically, this may have been a sector that lived by the mantra of move fast and break things, but issues raised here require deep thought and detail. He this spokesperson's main point is that Facebook has this infamous policy of moving quick. They gain market dominance. They sabotage competitors, and that's not an acceptable strategy when deploying global financial services. Why is that not acceptable? Is it because the competition is the government issued money? Like they're like, oh, so you can't do that. I mean, listen, I'm excited about there being competing currencies. I think the two choices, if it's between Libra and US dollar, they're both probably kind of shit. But I'm really excited about there being competition. It'll make banks and maybe central banks lift their game. It'll make Libra lift its game. They have to compete for customers' money. So they're going to be offering perks. They're going to maybe be offering interest rates. Heaven forbid someone in the US can put money in a bank account, actually earn interest on their deposit, because this hasn't happened for a very long time. So I'm interested to see this get shaken up and people being forced to provide better services for consumers because of competition. Already we have Bitcoin, though. We have other currencies that provide much better services. So I'm more excited about people learning about some of those other ones via Libra. I think that's going to be interesting. But yeah, the UK is just not too happy about this. But then, meanwhile, Russia, on the other side of things, they say that they are not going to ban Facebook's Libra currency. And this was actually said by the deputy finance minister. So a pretty high-ranking official there. And he said that it's going to be treated in Russia like any other digital asset. And Russia has had like a a strange past with cryptocurrencies. They've kind of been on the fence about Bitcoin and other digital assets and gone back and forth. But it is interesting to see right here that they're saying, no, we're not going to ban it. So he also adds, it will be possible to buy it, sell it, keep it, but not use it to pay for goods and services. So that's where the tricky relationship of Russia with cryptocurrencies come in. Yes, the legitimate market should be formed, but it's out of the question that under the banner of a legitimate market, everything is possible. So there's going to be legislation about this. We're going to have to figure out in what sense it's going to be allowed in Russia. So we have to remember it's not just America making decisions about whether or not Libra can exist or not. There are other powerhouses around the world. Russia may permit it. We'll have to see what happens there. So enough about Libra. Let's move on to some other countries that are eyeing cryptocurrency right now. Cuba. So Cuba, the sanctions, they think that crypto could be a solution to sanctions. And they're also saying that, potentially it could bolster its finances. This was made in an announcement on their state-run television, saying that they could potentially use crypto as part of a package aimed to boost incomes. And assist with market reforms. I mean, I'm always a fan of market reforms if it takes it more towards like free market and choice. They're saying that they're influenced by Venezuela. I mean, it's not a country that I would associate with free choice in terms of money. It's a country where people have caps on the amount of money they can access from their own bank accounts. It's like $5 a day. You've got bans on certain currencies there. You have a whole bunch of Bitcoin miners that were just shut down. Mining operations shut down years ago in Venezuela. So they're looking there for inspiration. Not too hopeful of what's going to happen, but Venezuela did launch the Petro last year, and I think that may be the route that Cuba is looking to go down. So in the TV announcement, again, he's just saying that cryptocurrency plan, we want to raise national production and demand in order to boost growth. One thing it is important to note is that after the Petro was released, Donald Trump did add the Petro to the list of sanctioned assets. So it's not like this was a workaround. It may make it easier to bypass these sanctions, but he did speak out and say this is not allowed. And that's a whole nother conversation about whether or not sanctions and blacklists on cryptocurrencies are useful at all, whether they're at all effective. We saw that as soon as the Department of the Treasury last year put out a list of sanctioned addresses, Bitcoin addresses, they just got completely attacked by people in the community, not because they supported the people who are apparently being sanctioned or blacklisted, but just because they didn't like the idea of money being censorable. And they were proving a point, saying you can put out as many rules as you want, but that's not going to stop people. So there are lots of thousands of transactions sent to these addresses, like microtransactions with quite nasty messages attached towards the Department of Treasury. So that's always interesting, seeing that pushback from the community. And then we move over to Venezuela. So Venezuela, I mean, the Petro, like what even is the Petro? They say it's backed by oil, but it's like this crazy, again, like it's government fiat. It has value because the government dictated that it has value, not because it has any value on the open markets. And for sure, it doesn't exist on open markets either. So it's not possible to actually get proper price determination about the Petro. And so, now you have Maduro. He's ordered the top bank to make the Petro available to the public and allow customers to access the Petro. So that's interesting. He says, who was it? It wasn't Maduro who said this. It was the Venezuelan Ministry of Finance. They said, I give the express order for transaction counters for the Petro to be opened in all Bank of Venezuela agencies. So again, it's just the government kind of pushing their shitty coin on people and saying like, yes, you must accept this, whether or not they actually want to. I worry about everything that's going on in Venezuela, and my heart goes out to all the people who are suffering over there. Petro isn't probably going to help them. It's just another shitty currency, and what they're doing to the bolivar by just like chopping off zeros as a way of helping them, saving them from hyperinflation. I mean, it's just craziness. What can help are other currencies that can cross borders. I know lots of people who are accepting Bitcoin there. People are saying that things like Smart Cash and Dash, etc., are being used over there. It's hard to verify to what extent these coins are accepted, but it is clear that they're able to be accepted and that they are helpful because these people can purchase things overseas and have them shipped in illegally. Actually, this happens quite a lot. People, for example, will use Bitcoin to buy things from Walmart or Overstock, and then they will ship in these goods, and these goods, feed entire villages and things. So seeing cryptocurrency in general help people such as those in Venezuela is really exciting to see. Moving on to some less sad things, more interesting things. So there's a Brazilian bank that apparently plans to use TEZOS as a blockchain for its security token offerings. They're currently using Ethereum, I believe, and now they're looking into TEZOS. So that's really interesting. Tim Draper, he's a big investor in TEZOS, and he's the CEO founder of Draper Associates. He says that we are excited to see BTG Pactual and Dalma Capital making use of the TEZOS blockchain. We are believers in the TEZOS project and see a strong use case for security tokens. So it is interesting to see. I mean, TEZOS started off with this very rocky start. There were immediately lawsuits and squabbles over money in the foundation there, and we have to remember that the foundation of TEZOS is quite distinct from the technology that is TEZOS. So it is interesting to see now different countries and different banks in this case look into TEZOS as being an interesting chain for them to explore. The good thing about TEZOS is that it I mean, they explain it here, but I can't quite find it. But Tezos does allow you to have on-chain governance in a way that other chains don't. So if you need to make upgrades, etc., it is easier for you to do that. And Tezos actually, I think it was last month, saw its first upgrade that was voted on by the network, successfully implemented. That was pretty exciting to see. So now that we're starting to see this chain pick up after the initial controversy that kind of surrounded it, I'm interested to see where it goes. They did raise a lot of money in their ICO. They were one of the first ICOs and the biggest, and I'm interested to see what development happens as a result of that. But seeing different banks kind of recognize the potential of this makes me curious about it. Let's move on. I just want to talk. So I don't know how to. I love talking about Craig. I also hate talking about Craig because it's like, I don't want to give more exposure, I guess is the word, to all of this. But when you have falsified docs going into court and being presented, like, I don't know, if you guys didn't watch my coverage of what happened in the first day of court, I was following, I think there were about 7 people, and then there was this awesome thread in Bitcoin Talk forum that was covering everything that was going in from people who actually they're live, who were taking notes, etc. So what happened over and over was these documents were presented and Craig would respond and say, I've never seen that before. And then the prosecutor would say, it was your side that submitted those documents. And it was just kind of this like strange thing where he apparently didn't recognize any of the documents submitted by his side. So now more documents have been submitted by his side that apparently were falsified. 2 of them in particular, one of them was an email that I think he said that it was from 2011, but we found out that the original was unveiled and it was actually 2014. Stephen Pally explained this pretty well, where you actually go into all of the metadata in this. You've got the return path. He tweeted the return path ruffle, mentioning that the date in there that wasn't doctored. He says, where was it? I can't find the tweet now, but he says, also June 24th, 2011 was a Friday. So when you change the date on something, but you don't change it in the metadata, or you don't change the actual day of the week in order to match, like there are all these inconsistencies. It's interesting to watch all of this pan out, but it doesn't look good for Craig right now. The most recent thing was apparently a 2012 trust doc. So if you look at this trust doc, it is Dr. Craig Wright and Equator Consultants. it says that it's basically establishing what this trust is going to be. You have 10 blocks, trust addresses, the number of Bitcoins going into each. And all of this, it's dated as October 2012. But then you look at the metadata on the fonts, and apparently the font is copyrighted from 2015. So I'm not sure how they use a font that wasn't in existence until 2015. And people have pushed back and said, no, this font was created in 2007. You're an idiot and all this. But the metadata is right there. It may have been created there, but this version that's being used in this document was copyrighted in 2015, and that copyright notice is there embedded in the PDF. So this is the actual trust doc. This isn't an image of it, which, again, you could change the metadata, etc. This is the original trust doc. So it's just, it is pretty funny, and I'm glad that Stephen is on all of this and posting everything that's going on there. I just wanted to mention that was a recent update that that happened in this case. So next thing, we're running out of time here, so I want to mention BITFINEX has repaid Tether $100 million of the $700 million loan that they took out. This has been like a big debacle. I don't know if you guys have been following this, but basically Tether issued a line of credit to BITFINEX. BITFINEX lost a bunch of money because some people who were holding this money that, it's so confusing what happened. It's like I kind of wonder what the actual story is, but apparently there was this company that was holding a bunch of money for them. It wasn't in their name or something. Then the company disappeared, ran off with this money. BITFINEX needed backup funds or something. Tether lent it to them because apparently BITFINEX and Tether, it's the same people running it. So then the New York Attorney General stepped in and was like, you need to disclose all of this stuff, and Tether clearly isn't backed one-to-one, and this is fraudulent, and you're misleading people and all this. I mean, you can say what you want about Tether. One thing I will say about the New York Attorney General is that I don't see her going after the banks that are fractional reserve banking. In fact, you see them actually covering up a lot of things going on with these banks. So it makes me really annoyed to see the double standards. It does seem like they're just going after crypto in general. Maybe Tether was a low-hanging fruit for them, and that's why they're attacking it. Again, this is completely aside from what you think about BITFINEX and Tether and all of this, but it is just it just seems like it's government versus crypto, in my opinion, and they're just trying to bring this down, maybe try to create a bank run, I'm not quite sure. But now BITFINEX has said that it's repaid 100 million of this, so we'll see what happens there. There's still an ongoing legal battle with New York Attorney General over the alleged cover-up of its $850 million loss. And I also wonder why the New York Attorney General is involved in this, because BITFINEX isn't actually available for New York customers. And I don't know, it's just like this, is this strange fight. Like, Tether is available in New York, I believe, but BITFINEX is not, and this is a legal battle with BITFINEX and New York Attorney General. It's just a strange thing. I think that New York is completely overreaching. It's not out of the ordinary for them to be doing so. It's an ongoing battle where they're just treating crypto badly, and this is just part of their fight against crypto. But we'll have to see what happens. I will keep you updated with all things BITFINEX and Tether. I would just be careful of anything going on there. It's not quite clear what's happening there. One thing that is interesting is we didn't see the Tether price plummet when all of this news came out. So it was interesting to note, but that's all I'm going to say about that for now. Some things I just want to mention in passing before we end here. Blockstream launches atomic swaps on liquid Bitcoin sidechain. So that is something that they're experimenting with at the moment. Seems pretty cool. You have Casa. They just launched Lightning Node mobile app for Bitcoin newbies. It's basically a way of them controlling their Lightning Node through their wallet. And it's a way of people earning perhaps their first Bitcoin, but also enables them, if they continue in the crypto space, to then go on to manage Lightning nodes in just one mobile app. So it's kind of, it seems to run the spectrum of different types of crypto users. So that's kind of interesting. UK regulators approve the first cryptocurrency hedge fund. This was an interesting topic because it's 2019. And it's my understanding that crypto hedge funds have been in existence for a really long time, but apparently UK regulators are now on board. They just approved the first one. So good on you, UK. That's really awesome stuff. You had an outage affecting Coinbase, CoinMarketCap, and some other top crypto websites. And it was a Cloudflare issue. I don't know if anyone was affected by that. Let me know if you were. I would love to know to what extent it was an issue, but just wanted to let people know about that. You got people trying to deal with this FATF travel rule, something I'll mention in passing. I did bring up the travel rule on the show last week on the weekly recap. Basically, the idea is that they're forcing exchanges to share financial, like consumers' data with each other. The idea that if an exchange sends or receives money, they have to have all the information about the person sending or receiving it, and that has to be shared with the exchanges where they're going. So this is like a really burdensome rule that's going to be on crypto exchanges, because none of that information is baked into transactions, and sometimes you have anonymous accounts that send money, and it's like it's going to be difficult, and you've got some different blockchain solutions coming up trying to help that. Thank you, Boston. I really appreciate your support there with the super chat. You didn't send me a message to read, so I will just say thank you and kind of sing your name or whatever that was. But I really appreciate your support. You've got scammers in Australia. Apparently there was this Australian scam, coinex.org. They stole a bunch of money, like millions of dollars from different consumers, posing it's this other side, I think, which was coinex.com. Coinex.org was basically a Ponzi scheme. Money eventually ran dry, and then they ran out with people's money, and then they apparently taunted them. So some real good characters there. Pretty awful to watch that stuff happening. And then you've got, I don't know if anyone's been keeping up with Arthur Hayes. So he's the CEO of BITFINEX. Apparently he debated Nouriel Roubini, and Nouriel was kind of going on this tirade like, I crushed you, and Arthur's like, no, I crushed you in the debate, and Nouriel's like, no, you have to release the tapes, everyone must see me crushing you, and Arthur's like, we will release the tapes and everyone will see me crushing you. I don't know, I just find Arthur Hayes kind of funny. And Nouriel I find delightfully amusing. He's such a troll. But yeah, so that's going on. And that's all the news that I'm going to cover today. It's a lot to take in. I didn't want to go too much over time. So just letting you know all these wonderful things. I'm going to be keeping you updated, especially with the Libra stuff, because I think all of that stuff is pretty awesome. And it's kind of spearheaded by Maxine Waters. She's very much against crypto. This is not the first time she's spoken out against crypto. It's very clear that she doesn't like it. So I'll keep you updated on everything going on there. I'll also keep you updated on the Craig Wright hearing. It's been fascinating to watch that unfold. We had one day in court, but it was very clear that it wasn't all going to get sorted in one hearing. The reason for the hearing was basically the judge or magistrate or whatever it was asked him to unveil, God, I'm tying my words, aren't I? Asked him to unveil and reveal his Bitcoin addresses, and he didn't comply. So the hearing, they ordered him to come appear in person in this Florida court to see whether or not he'd be held in contempt of court for that. So I'll keep you updated on all of that. There will be another court day dealing with that. So let you all know what happens there. I just got, JR from Exciting World Cryptos just sent me a message. Thank you so much. He said a kind message to say thanks for all your time and efforts in keeping the crypto world in tune. Thanks for being here. Always appreciate it. I always appreciate you, JR. And you guys should go check out his channel. JR always puts up some really interesting videos in the most beautiful landscapes that you've ever seen. He'll just have like waterfalls and forests and glaciers and like craziness happening in the background. So go check out his stuff there. And yeah, I really appreciate your support, everyone. Thank you for being here. Go and have, I didn't drink any of my tea. I had like 2 sips. I was just so scared of there being like silences. I think I'm terrified of silences. Generally, Chris will like butt in and he'll fill up the silences. But when I drink, it's just silence. Yeah, it's so strange. I can't handle it. Anyway, Thank you for being here. Go enjoy your tea. Go enjoy the rest of your Friday or Saturday, if it's Saturday where you are, and have a wonderful weekend. If you celebrated Secession Day yesterday, I hope you had a wonderful time, and go and enjoy yourself. I really appreciate you all being here, and also this week I reached 10,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, and I'm so grateful to all of you. That just made me really, really happy. Building up a channel in the crypto space it's very slow progress, and I just appreciate that there are that many people who are interested in watching my videos. So thank you so much. That was so wonderful, and I got a couple new Patreon and Bitbacker supporters in the process. So that helps me to keep this channel running. I couldn't do it without you. So just a huge thank you, guys. I really appreciate you and your support. So go have a wonderful weekend. I love all of you, and enjoy yourselves. Thanks for being here.